Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2024 Halloum Negotiation Competition. Woo, yes. My name is Natalie Winters. I have the pleasure of being the Director of Advocacy Competitions here at Berkeley Law. I'm very excited to kick things off with the final round that we have behind us here today, and I know you didn't come to hear me talk. So I just have a couple of things I wanted to mention before we get started. First, you can find the names of today's student finalists in your programs, as well as the names of our wonderful judges who volunteered their time to be here today. I also want to make sure and give a shout out to this year's donor firms whose generous support make events like this possible. And in alphabetical order, they are Freshfields, Gunderson Detmer, Kirkland and Ellis, Skadden, and Wilkie. Round of applause for our donors, please. And so in just a moment, you're gonna see these two teams behind me do a live negotiation in front of you, or if you're watching our recording, it won't be live then, but you get what I'm saying. When I give them the go signal, they're actually just gonna jump right into that negotiation. So you should have a summary of the general facts to give you some context about how these two teams or these two parties got here in this hypothetical universe that you're about to step into for the next hour or so. You will see a negotiation for 40 minutes. After that, the teams will actually leave the room just for 3 minutes and then come in one at a time and do what we call a post-negotiation analysis, where they actually come back and tell the judges how they think it went, and they get scored on that too. Once that comes to a close, our judges will go ahead and tally up their ballots, and we're gonna announce a winner in front of you here today, hand out some exciting trophies, and wrap things up and get you off to your classes, which I know some of them may start shortly after too. So we'll make sure we keep you on time. I hope you're enjoying your Chipotle. Feel free to keep eating during the round, but I do ask that you try to minimize your use of electronics. Make sure your phones and anything that will make a noise is on Do Not Disturb. I know you'd hate to be the reason that there's a distraction for one of our finalist teams up here. So thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting them. And with that, please go ahead and give our finalists your full attention. They've worked hard to get here, went through 2 preliminary rounds and a semifinal round in order to make it here today. So I know they're looking forward to diving in, and I don't want to keep them from it any longer. Finalists, when you're ready, please negotiate.
We're really happy to be here. My name is Yi Chu, and I'm here with my co-counsel Chen to represent our client, PalsGab. And PalsGab has grown from a small family venture into now a public company and one of the most popular social media apps. Our client is really excited for this mission that your client has of bringing hospitality and cruise industry to millennials and Gen Zs that's on our platform. We're glad to see that we have already agreed on a $2.5 billion purchase price. We're just going to iron out some details today. My co-counsel Betty is going to lay out the terms we're hoping to discuss today. So that includes our payment schedule of the agreed upon $2.5 billion. We're also going to talk about retention plan of our employees, termination fee and reverse termination fee if parties were to terminate prior to closing, and also indemnification. With that, also wanted to let you guys introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here. My name is Abby Smith.
And I'm Eleanor Bock.
And we are the counsel for Carousel Cruises. Just want to take just a quick moment to acknowledge how far PalsGab has come. I know that you all recently went public. You got new headquarters. It's really exciting, and we're really excited to talk about the future of both of our companies together. As you have said, our CEOs have preliminarily had discussions about the $2.5 billion potential acquisition. And so we're really excited to kind of just understand how that can help us bring Carousel into the future of cruises, right? In a post-COVID world, how Gen Z can explore new ways to travel, and we really think that this collaboration will help us get there. Before we dive into kind of the schedule of everything that you all laid out today, we just also want to acknowledge that there have been some just allegations of potential environmental or labor allegations that stem from Carousel. And so we wanted to kind of lay the conversation with that foundation and saying we know that those are going on, we take those seriously, and we're working with the team to understand how we continue to move forward in light of those allegations. And in addition to everything that we proposed today, we also would like to just see if we could come to some sort of ESG provision, not together during this meeting, but as we bring everything that we agreed to today back to our teams, we also want to do some sort of joint environmental and social governance provision. We want to build trust with you all, and Charlie, we know that this is very special to her, and so we want to make sure that she has her mission and her values with PalsGab are continuing to be aligned with the mission and values of us. So wanted to just put that out there as well.
Thank you so much for mentioning our CEO and our Charlie. This company and the values it stands for is definitely very important. I appreciate you mentioning that up front, the current issues that may be going on in Carousel. Shall we begin with the payment schedule, if this agenda looks good for you?
Perfect.
So for the payment schedule, the agreed upon price was $2.5 billion, and I think our client just wants to keep it nice and simple and just have it all paid up front at closing. Do you have any ideas as to maybe not doing that?
Yeah, so in terms of just generally, typically within acquisitions, we always find it best to do an earn-out provision. So what this would mean is contingent upon a certain revenue threshold that is met year over year. If we meet that certain threshold, then an additional amount would be paid. So for example, I think we'd like to start closer to $2.2 billion paid upfront. And then after a year, if at least 100% of the revenue is met compared to the previous year, then the additional $300 million would be paid out. And so this just kind of helps provide continued stake in the company as we're kind of, offboarding PalsGab onto its current state and onboarding them into Carousel, allows us to really ensure that we're all continued to move toward the same vision and really motivated to keep that revenue up.
Yeah, and sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I definitely understand where the earnout provision is coming from, and definitely our client's objective is to keep as much revenue retention as possible, but we don't think that an earnout provision is one that would work in this sense, just because it does give rise to a moral hazard. We have agreed, or our clients have agreed, that Carousel will be taking sole control of the integration of our software into the hospitality space, and so there may be some incentive to not reach that, criteria that you've set at 100% right now. And so we think the best option is to just not have an earnout and use maybe some other terms, maybe with the termination, with the retention, something that could incentivize, good faith in pushing this joint.
Yeah, I think that our CEO, Tony, doesn't have qualms that we're not going to be able to reach the expected value that we think we are. But I think that just because 2.5 billion is such a big number, he just really wants some assurance for us, especially in light of some of the legal issues potentially facing PalsGab that might impact public perception and therefore impact revenue. He did tell us that he definitely is going to need some type of earnout provision, but is flexible with what the requirement would be for how much revenue that that we would have to get next year. So do you think that an earnout provision in light of maybe getting 90% or something of the revenue would be amenable to your client?
So I think there are numerous factors that impact revenue. One very clear one is that Carousel will no longer be contributing to our revenue, and Carousel has been historically one of our biggest advertisers on the platform. Other things that are outside of our control or our client's control is that the hospitality industry has been notoriously slow on tech updates, and integrating something so new may be difficult. It may require a little bit of buffer period to get that actually running at full speed. Another thing is that the social media industry is quite fast moving, and any hiccup, as I mentioned before, will cause users to just go for alternatives. And this is something that we see quite often. And we, again, do want to reiterate that an earnout provision may cause PR issues in the future. And I know you are worried about those PR issues, but earnouts do tend to lead to litigation about, if the criteria has been met, how the accounting is actually done, if the earnout should be paid out or not. And so, again, those are some of our concerns, but we'd be happy to go into some other terms and maybe come back around to this in a bit.
And just to add to the PR concern, as you've mentioned at the start of this, there are some allegations going on about Carousel on our platform. So that in itself could impact revenue that has nothing to do with our product or our contribution. And the fact that you guys are acquiring the very platform that you guys are seeing some PR backlash, that itself could be a recipe for public backlash. So we just wanted to acknowledge those risks and really point out that 100% target is not quite practical for us.
Definitely. I think those are very, very valid concerns. I know that you all went through a lot, so I just want to kind of reiterate some of that to make sure we're on the same page. You see a PR issue with Carousel acquiring a company where, that very company has been used as a platform to surface allegations. I know we said we wanted to lay a foundation of trust and goodwill with bringing an additional ESG provision to make sure that our missions are aligned. So I actually don't really see a concern that we need to kind of hinder anything we come to right now in terms of those potential allegations. As a PR issue, I think we can actually really work through that together at a later negotiation or a later meeting. And in terms of advertising revenue, I think that's very valid. I think 100% is pretty standard, but I think we could go down potentially from 100%, like my co-counsel recommended, to 90%. We are a big advertiser with you all, but I think we also, in potentially capturing that market and bringing PalsGab into Carousel, can create opportunities for new advertisers and really open up that potential, because this will be an innovative feature within the cruise line market. And so, I think it's a valid concern. I don't think we can definitively say whether or not the ad revenue is going to fall dramatically to the point where we don't need an earnout. And so I know you all wanted to get to some other provisions today, but I do know for us specifically, the termination and the indemnification clauses, I think we'd love to be able to understand those as they relate to the upfront price. And so I think we won't be able to definitively answer those two provisions until we understand what our upfront payment would be.
Got you. And we actually also think these terms are interconnected. And one thing that jumps out to us is the retention plan and how that ties into a potential earnout. Because, we're not gonna, we're concerned of how we're going to achieve the earnout if we're not retaining our key employees and executives. Is that okay if we jump to retention first?
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds good. So we, as I mentioned before, we started off as a family venture, really, Charlie and her brother. A lot of the senior executives stayed on with the team, and we're hoping to continue to see that, in part to achieve the earnout goal that is laid out, but also just for better transition, for better integration. I know you guys are going to a very new industry. We're hoping to keep everybody on board and offer a one-year fixed contract for all executives.
And for clarity, when you say executives, do you mean all C-suite level, or is that all employees?
Level, yeah.
Okay, and so you want a one-year contract for all of them guaranteed?
Yeah.
Okay, I think for us, it would make a lot of sense for us to keep employees generally of PalsGab connected with Carousel overall, just as I think we share the same concerns, right, of this is, we're a cruise line, we're very excited about this technology, we are not software developers, and so I think it makes sense for some employees to stay on. In terms of the C-suite employees, I think we had agreed that their salaries would stay the same as they came on to Carousel within the acquisition, but we know they are C-suite employees, right? They have higher salaries, and that is pretty expensive, and so we think that it would be helpful for us to start them with a 4-month contract and a 4-month contract that stays on, and then with guaranteed 4 months salary severance as well.
I see. I think our mutual goal here is to try to retain as many C-suite as possible to ensure the smooth transition, at least in a year after closing. We think a year-long provision is just outright reasonable, because we have agreed on a 1-year earnout, right? So to have a shorter provision than the earnout just does not really make a lot of sense. With a 1-year provision, we can then talk about what their severance package could look like and how we can best incentivize them to stay.
Yeah, I think Tony expressed to us that we definitely want to keep on some of the C-suite level employees for some period of time, but at the same time, like, we're a cruise company and some of the positions are going to be redundant. And these executives are making upwards of $200,000, $300,000 as having, for example, like 2 CEOs or 2 COOs. We don't know if that would be amenable to our client, but what we really are concerned about is keeping on like non-executive employees, and we wanted to emphasize their contracts and severance packages just because we know they're like economically not in the same place as the executives, and we'd also be willing to offer severance packages to the executives at their existing salary, so they can still be making that getting $200,000-$300,000 while they're seeking other jobs in the tech industry.
I see. If we table the term of the fixed contract for a little bit and just talk about severance in the severance land, would you guys be amenable to a 2-year severance package for the C-suite executives and for everybody else have a 1-year severance package?
I think 2 years for the C-suite executives might be too high just because they're making so much money, and we would prefer to give like more severance to the lower level employees who might have difficulty like getting hired or lateraling over to another company. I think, Abby, do you remember how much we were authorized to?
Yeah, so I think, so basically in talking to our client, he really thinks about how long we're keeping them on in addition to the severance. And so I think it's helpful for us to kind of talk about those two together and talk about the C-suite contracts plus severance, and then all other employees' contracts plus severance together. So first, for C-suite, I know you all mentioned you wanted a year contract with a 2-year severance. I think, as Elle said, it's pretty high for us, and like we said, those are very valuable people. We are very confident that they will find success elsewhere in the industry if they choose to do so, and if that's what ends up happening. And so I know we mentioned 4 and 4. It sounds like you want 1 year plus 2 years, and so we're definitely open to like being a little bit more flexible there before we jump into the other employees that are not at the C-suite level. Would you all be open to, let's see, like a 7-month contract with a 6-month salary severance for the C-suite?
And obviously we would, these employees would potentially have the opportunity to stay longer, but just we as the council wouldn't be able to decide that. It would be more of like a performance specific and needs of the company, as like usually happens in an acquisition.
Got you. That's very reasonable. I just want to add a little context is that the C-suite are the people we are trying to win over to help us finalize the deal and push this through, right? One thing we can propose is, because some of the C-suites have stayed with us for a long time, we want to reward that loyalty and consistency. Can we do a tenure-based solution where for every year they've stayed with the company, we add 1 month to their severance package? So someone who stayed with us 3 years could have, if we're under 7+6 structure, it would be 7+9, but not for everyone. There'll be people who are just 7+6. Does that sound possibly?
I think our team would need to review a list of all the employees and how long they have been with the company for us to be able to agree to that today.
Sounds like we have some, touching points already. Shall we move over to another item?
Yeah, I just want to just quick clarity. I know we're talking about 7 and 6. Just want to make sure that it's 6-month contract for employment and 7-month severance. That's what we're talking about for the C-suite executives, right?
For the C-suite only.
Yes.
Got you. We've taken down these numbers, and we'll.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're on the same page there, and we can maybe come back to that too, if we need to as well. But I think just want to make sure that has clarity. Did you want to talk about the other employees as well, and just kind of get retention secured, and then move to the other provisions?
For the other employee, we're not really looking at a fixed contract, but really just the severance package of 1 year, 1 year's, at their current salary rate. So a 1 year long, 1 year package for severance.
We wouldn't be able to do a whole year just based on our client's needs. But what we would be able to do, I think our client really finds value in having these employees stay to make sure the app is running and working the way that it should be and properly integrated with our systems. And so I think we would be able to do 10 months of severance for all of the other employees if they are 6 months, if they're laid off within 6 months.
Got you.
And so then after, just for clarity, after that 6 months occurs, then severance would not be guaranteed, but they would have that 10-month security for the first 6 months of the acquisition.
Got you. This will help us, understand what our package could be offered. So, with that, shall we move over to, termination and reverse termination?
So for termination, I think from our client's perspective, obviously they're coming in with the intent to see this acquisition through, and we're sure that Carousel is also on that same page. But at the same time, things happen, and so we do want to include a termination clause in our term sheet. And what that would look like for us is, in the industry, when there is an acquisition and the acquiring party pulls out first or initiates the termination, what we usually see is that the target company has some reputational damage because there's public perception that maybe the product isn't as good as it's shown to be. And so we're hoping to see maybe an increase in the percentage just for your side to compensate for that. So it would be like, say, 6% termination for our side, and then that would be 8% for your side.
So sorry, what percent for?
It could be any percentages, just like maybe a 2% increase for Carousel's termination.
Yeah, I think that might concern Tony a little bit. Just he might think that you guys are already getting cold feet and wanting to like pull out of the deal or maybe leverage it to try to get another offer. I think it would be really good for like building trust and just like respect between our CEOs if we could, whatever termination and reverse termination fee we come to could be equal, just because this could also have huge negative ramifications for Carousel. It could hurt our reputation as well. We plan to spend a lot of time and money on getting this deal through, and Tony doesn't have any like foresight that something is going to happen. But as you said, I know things do happen, and we just think that it would be fair if we could come to a similar fee for both terminations.
That makes sense. Do you have an idea of what would be triggering this termination? I think that's a good definition to lay down first.
I think we're pretty confident from our side that there is not going to be a termination on our end, but we do understand that still is a risk. Like, we both are taking risks in this acquisition and moving forward with the large amount. So I don't think we have any concerns on our end.
I know. I know a big thing for Tony also was that he wants the termination to be triggered on an intent to terminate the deal rather than closing a deal with another buyer, just because that would result in us continuing to use our time and effort and just thinking that we have a deal when PalsGab already knows that they are going to intend to terminate the deal. Do you think that is something that Charlie would be amenable to? Like an easily triggered termination?
So our client is definitely focused more on like the termination being triggered by an actual signing of or closing of the deal, because that shows the full commitment of actually leaving this deal. And so I think there are creative solutions that could be had here. What is your biggest concern with PalsGab's termination? Is it that we find another bidder, perhaps in the same industry, that you're concerned about, or just any other bidder?
I think it's just that we would have invested the time, the money, the resources, the personnel into trying to get the deal done, whereas PalsGab already knows that they're not going to sign a deal with us, or not going to close the deal with us, rather, because this would have been after we'd signed, and are just like stringing us along while they're actively looking for another deal.
Yeah. In addition, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, in addition to all of that, I think we're putting in a lot of effort into this deal, and I know our CEOs specifically have spoken with each other. They're both very excited about this, but I think also this does take a lot of time, and our ultimate goal for our client is to make sure that Carousel Cruises can move into the future and be kind of an innovator in the cruise space. And so we're looking to make sure that the technology that we're using is great and appropriate and really resonates with Gen Z, just like PalsGab does. And so if there is an intent to terminate, we would want to make sure that we're just aware of that if we do have to try and find a different technology somewhere else. And so I think it's really beneficial for both of us just to make sure, if we're on the same page and to say, we're going ahead with this deal, or to pull back and say, no, we have an intent not to continue.
Is there a specific percentage for that termination?
We have a little bit of flexibility with that. I know you'd mentioned 6% for termination if PalsGab is the one to pull out. I think that would be something amenable to our client if we could have a 6% reverse termination fee and a 6% termination fee. And then...
I think in the interest of time, maybe we move on to indemnification really quickly and then come back around.
Okay.
But thank you for those numbers. It's been really helpful.
Yeah. So on indemnification, would really want to understand, where you guys are coming from. What kind of concerns do you see that you think would need indemnification?
Yeah. So with Carousel acquiring PalsGab, we would be taking everything. We'd be taking any liability that PalsGab was facing, any pending lawsuits, any issues like that. We do know that there is a potential class action against PalsGab, and just because so many class actions settle, and we would potentially be paying out a lot of people if this goes through, we were looking for some amount held in escrow to protect us against that lawsuit.
Just to clarify, this is not yet a class action lawsuit because it has not gone past the certification stage, that we both are well versed in our civil class. Now, this distant threat of class action, we don't think it's wise to set aside, a huge amount of liquidity just for that, especially when we already, potentially looking at an earn-out provision. So we think it would be reasonable for us to indemnify for any lawsuit with a filing date that is before the closing date, and we'll be happy to set aside approximately $50 million in escrow in some other way to indemnify for that particular legal cost.
Yeah. So I think, as you said, with a date filed before we come to an agreement, it can take years for a class action about something that had already happened to be certified, and this was something that happened under Charlie's watch. So I think our client is really looking for specific indemnification and protection against this specific potential class action. I know that this would be like a huge, could be a huge legal issue, and there's not only monetary, but as you mentioned earlier, moral ramifications for class actions. So I think our client was looking for something closer to $140 million, put in an escrow fund, and we can negotiate on the time.
It sounds like your client's mostly concerned with not only any litigation but class action in particular. Now we definitely recognize that. We're happy to have a narrow indemnification for just class action, and with a time period of 1 year post closing, because that's also on our earn-out and everything else is aligned. We can do $75 million for class action specifically, for the year after closing. Does that sound like something your client might be open to?
I think we might need something a little bit higher than that. I understand that it's a potential class action, but as Elle said, there's always the risk that based on something that our client wasn't done under their supervision, is going to cost a lot of money, especially if it does get to the point of settlement, because PalsGab obviously is so popular, right? That means there's a lot of users and a lot of potential class members. And so I think the $75 million gets us a lot closer to where we want to be. Would you all be amenable to $90 million for a class action?
I do want to call out that it's really hard in deals like this to determine what happened under whose watch. Especially here with this deal structure, day one of closing, you guys will be assuming sole control. So there's really hard for us to, tell, and it will be terrible to have this fight over what happened under whose watch. If we can narrow that down to, the current trust and safety issues that we see on the platform and any class action in relation to that, I think we'll be open to coming closer to the 90 million that you guys were talking about. Now that we have some numbers on the table and we've flushed out some points, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and would that be okay just to flush out the numbers internally?
Don't worry, that's allowed. So each side has the option to call a 5-minute break during the course of the negotiation. This will count towards their negotiation time. So this is a strategic choice to sacrifice time that could have been spent at the negotiation table to speak privately with your co-counsel and figure out how you want to go forward. It sounds like, based on what I heard, although I've been listening to the same negotiation that you are, so it's not like I have any inside info, it sounds like they might be trying to do everything they can to get to a deal right now so they can try and get some numbers up on the board for you. I'll just remind our audience members and also our judges, although I reminded them of this during their judges training, that they don't actually have to reach a deal today for this to be a successful negotiation for both sides, right? Whenever you're in a deal like this, and I'm sure our experienced practitioners could speak even further to this than I will at the moment, it may not be the case that you come to an agreement on every single term that's up there on the initial meeting that you have with the other side to try to hammer these things out, right? Maybe you agree on one of them, maybe you agree on two of them, but a successful outcome for your client can still be, you know what, we're at the end of our time here, and I think we still want to think more about these other two. It sounds like here's where we are. Do you agree with that? Yeah? Let's come back in a couple weeks or in a month and talk again once we've had a chance to go back to our clients. I see we're out of time today. Great to meet you. Have a great rest of your week. So it's not something that will be held against them if they can't reach a number on every single one of these terms. Maybe they walk away without reaching a deal at all. That's okay. That's not necessarily a bad outcome. They're really just trying to do everything they can to advocate the best they can for their clients' interests. So I'm timing them on their 5-minute break here. Looks like they've got just under 3 minutes left, so we will see them shortly. For now, please stay in your seats, and this negotiation should wrap up in about 10 minutes. All right, we'll see them soon.
Time for some whiteboarding exercise.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us. I know that we've gone through a lot of provisions. We're at about a 10-minute time check. I know that we've kind of come to some agreements. Would you all mind if we just put some ranges on the board of the things we've discussed previously? Okay, perfect. So it sounds like for retention, we have everybody starting at a 6-month contract.
Oh, we hadn't agreed on those earlier. Should I throw out some proposals?
Yeah, I think we'll just write our proposals. I just want to make sure we're on the same page and we don't get to the end and then, get a little confused.
Shall I propose and then we write?
Yeah.
So I think for the payment schedule, we'll start there. We're looking, I know you mentioned with a 300 million earnout. Unfortunately, that would be too high for us. We're all willing to consider, our client is willing to consider an earnout, but it would have to be less than that. So we were looking at 2.4 billion upfront with a 100 million earnout. And again, we mentioned a lot of other outside of our control issues that would bring down revenue, a lot of it being your control, your client's control, and then your client's various other PR nightmares, the fact that we're already having a cut in revenue because of the advertising that you no longer need to pay, and all of that stuff. So we were looking at a 75% criteria, and that would be for 1 year. So the earnout for 1 year, I think, sets the basis for a lot of the other things that are also time-based. So the retention plan for the C-suite, because we want to make sure that there is some of PalsGab's original employees being able to work on retaining as much revenue as possible, that the C-suite have a 1-year guaranteed contract. And again, the other thing was the indemnification for the 1-year period post-closing as well. That's also based entirely on the earnout duration.
Yeah, back on the, just going like one step at a time. So with your proposal for the payment plan,
Yes.
Since we would be giving you we'd only be taking 100 million as the earnout rather than our proposed 300 million, do you think that the target percentage could be higher than 75%? So we're kind of not giving on both of those provisions of the payment.
So 80%?
We were looking closer to 90%. Do you think maybe 85 might be amenable to Charlie?
I think 85% out of 100 million. We can put that on the table for now and see where we come on the other issues, but we can discuss that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
And then I think
Go ahead.
The number also aligns with our indemnification proposal of my colleague was discussing with you for a very narrowly tailored, currently identified trust and safety issue class actions, having a 1-year post-closing indemnification, and the amount that we were thinking is 85 million.
Yeah.
So,
I know we had talked about like 90 previously. I think that's kind of like pushing some limits just based on how much our client feels comfortable with given the risk of the class action and just given the potential wide reach of those class members. And so I think 85 is still too low for us.
yeah, plus with, since the indemnification would only be held in escrow for a year, and as you said, the class action might not even happen, as you guys are, we hope it doesn't, but if there's no class action in a year, you get the 85 or 90, however much we agreed to back. So I think it would we would feel a lot better with not believing that there's going to be a class action if we do have that that like security backing it. Yeah, and it would only be a year.
If we're so concerned about class action, that's actually going to affect our target as well, right? If we see this risk of PR and user-based issues, if we go up to 95%, we'll want to keep the 75% target, just in the practical sense.
90 million.
Sorry, 90 million. If we go up to 90 million in escrow, we want to keep a 75% target.
Yeah, I don't think our client has authorized us to agree below the 85%, but maybe once we have all the other provisions, we can take that back to him and see if that is something, but we can't agree to that today.
And for termination, maybe we'll just fill in the rest of the boxes.
Perfect.
What I was hearing from your clients is the same for both of us, for both of the parties. And we were looking at a 6%. We were wondering if you'd be amenable to an 8% for both, with the trigger being at closing for PalsGab.
I think
Yeah, so just to clarify, the 8%, if we did keep the 2.4 billion up front, would be 192 million for both. Is that the number that you're just confirming, that 8%, that much?
It would be actually 8% of the total purchase price, not the earn-out subtracted purchase price, I guess. It would be 2.5 billion. Okay. Because at that point, the earn-out isn't a factor anymore because the acquisition is terminated.
Right. Okay. So I think maybe it'll help us to stay secured on the percentage for now, and then we might want to take that as an open item back to our client is if that's of the earn-out provision or of the total payment price. But in terms of the percentage, I know our client is hoping for something a little bit lower. We're very confident. We hope you're all very confident. And so this is really just a way for us to mitigate any risk that comes up. And we think the easily triggered termination fee just seems pretty fair for both of us given the time and investment and the large amount that is going into this.
I think our client would be amenable to an easily triggered one if we stayed at the 8% for both.
Yeah, again, from what we have, we can't agree to 8%. It's out of our client's boundaries. We can't agree to that today, but I feel pretty confident that if we went back to Tony with 8% in addition to a higher amount for indemnification, I think maybe if we give a little on that, he would be more amenable to go up to 8%. But he's only authorized us to go up to 7% today.
7
7% for both? Mm-hmm. How about again, mentioned before that we would be taking a reputational hit, a 7% for Carousel and a 6% for PalsGab. It would just be a 1% difference. And it would be still easily triggered, so we could notice at consider intent
too. If that's easily triggered, I think that would work for us.
Just to clarify though, I mean, it is 1%, yes, but that would be about like a $25 million difference. So I think Tony really would prefer like a more fair and equal percentage, and just if the reverse termination fee is different, then I think he might be a little concerned with PalsGab already having like cold feet about the deal.
So it sounds like we don't yet have an agreement here. If we can talk about retention just for a little bit, I see that you put down kind of 6-year fix for different months severance.
Yep.
First of all, do you think your client would be okay with this tenure-based system where for every year they've been with the company, we add a month to their severance package? It's pretty standard industry practice.
Yeah, I think that's the upper bounds for all other employees that are not C-suite for us. So that is kind of the best we can do right now. For the C-suite executives specifically, we'd have to cap that.
Yeah, and we'd have to know how many of the C-suite employees have, how long they've been there, and like a list of that to take back to our client.
I see. If we can go up to 8-month capped for C-suite and have this tenure-based system for employees, assuming they're both, if C-suite has a 1-year contract and we don't require contract for employees, does that sound like something, a closer number to what your clients is looking for?
I don't
lay it out.
Sorry, yeah, can you write that down? I don't think we could do a whole year. I think that's still too long for us, given just some of the redundancy issues that we talked about earlier. I know we're getting close to time. I think we would be open to a scaled solution. I think that's a great idea, but we would have to cap that, and we'd want to make sure that it's not scaled to the point where everyone's just getting the upper bounds of that, right? I think that's our concern. And so it looks like if we could all agree to the 6 months fixed contract, I would love to take the severance options back to our respective clients as well, and kind of talk through what that would look like.
I think maybe the retention is one thing that we might not be able to iron out. There's a lot of smaller details in that one. So going over the remaining 3, maybe we can settle for something there. Taking in what you've mentioned and what we've mentioned, how about the 100 million earnout at a higher target, 80%, with 8% termination fee for both parties that is easily triggered, 1-year indemnification at the lower price range would be 85 million.
We can't go lower than 90 on that.
Yeah.
If we go up to 90, would we have a deal on
75%?
on the other points?
I think we could do 83 for the target.
83.
That would be, that we would be confident going in with 83. We wouldn't be confident with going in at anything lower than that.
And we'd be okay with 8% mutual termination with easy trigger.
We have to, as I said, we had to go back to Tony. We're only authorized to go up to 7% today. We don't want to lead you guys on.
I see. Let me just put down what we agreed on. So this would be.
And I know we're almost, I think our timers are a little bit off. Yeah, so we can write down the finals, and then I think we're at time.
It sounds like we have a deal on most items, and with retention, we've talked about some creative solutions. Happy to look at the roster together and figure out the details in the next meeting.
Awesome, perfect. So we're confirmed on payment, confirmed on indemnification, retention, and termination. We can come back to you now that we know your goals. I think that'll be helpful for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was really.
All right, so as I mentioned at the start of today's event, you just finished seeing the negotiation. Now both teams actually have 3 minutes. I know it's quick, but 3 minutes to go ahead and get ready for their post-negotiation analysis. So in just a couple of minutes, you're going to see the Carousel team, who sat on your right over here, come back in and tell you how they think the negotiation went today, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and maybe field some questions from our judges if they have them. Sometimes we get questions, sometimes we don't, so no pressure, judges. Either way, each team has 5 minutes to do that post-negotiation analysis, and then we'll tally up the scores and declare a winner in front of you in about 15 minutes. So stay tuned. Thanks.
I'm Abby again.
I'm Eleanor.
And so we represented Carousel in this deal. Overall, we're happy with it. We think there were a lot of conflicting, just kind of like needs of both of our clients that definitely required some more attention in a later discussion. So we didn't come to a full deal today, but we did get the two most important provisions for our client, which were the indemnification as well as the earnout. And so those were within the bounds that our client wanted, and we thought that those were pretty fair terms based on all the information that he had given us before coming here. And one of our goals in general was to just try and build trust. There were some allegations against our client with some environmental and labor regulations, and so that's why we kind of started with the ESG provision, just to say, like, let's get that out of the way. We know that's going on. We'll talk about that later, but we didn't want that to incredibly affect anything else that we had talked through today. And so our goal was just to emphasize that trust and continue to build that throughout the entire conversation.
Yeah, I think we also did a good job at emphasizing, like, we're just the lawyers, we can't agree to this because if it's outside of the fact pattern that our client agreed to. We got like feedback in one of the earlier rounds, like, we can't agree to a deal, but just to emphasize that, like, we think we can come to this conclusion, like, how about, like, you make this term a little more amenable to our clients so they'll be more willing to, like, give a little on this. And I thought we did a good job of that, just because we really wanted to stay true to what our client wanted. I think also on the indemnification, the reverse termination fee, I think we did a good job emphasizing, like, the interest behind that. Like, we want to build fairness and trust, and, like, having a equal percentage if either one of us, like, walks out of the deal. I thought we did a good job of, like, staying true to that. And then I thought we did good at, like, being collaborative, like, so did Betty and Yi. We, like, faced them in another round, so I felt like we had a little, we already had, like, kind of knew how everyone worked. I think we could have improved on, like, less jumping around between the provisions. We went into the negotiation wanting to settle on a payment number at the beginning, like the upfront payment. So then when we calculated the termination and indemnification amounts, we could reference that, like, X% of 2.4 versus, like, X% of 2.2. But I think we still did a good job of, like, staying in the range while not having the specific upfront amount.
Yeah, definitely. And in addition to the collaboration, I think it's always, like, it felt very conversational, and I think that was very helpful for just both of our teams to come to this together, and we were trying to be transparent about our client's needs as well, and kind of, you know, where something was an absolute floor, an absolute max for him. I think we had some time pressure as well, in terms of having 40 minutes versus 50 minutes. And so I think that caused us to bounce around a little bit, right? To, like, talk through a whole provision and then not write a range of where we landed and then just move to the next one. So after the break, that's why we wanted to actually get some stuff on the whiteboard, and I know they put some things up there as well. And so, yeah, I think that was helpful for us to kind of take a break and come back and say, we've talked about things for 20 minutes. We don't want any of that information to get lost. Let's write that down on the board, even if they're just ranges. Just because it's on the board doesn't mean it's final, right? So we just wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost. And I think Elle also did a really good job at bringing up the concerns about the class action. And I think the other team was saying that it wasn't as big of a deal, but our client felt that that was a pretty big risk for them. And so I think we just did a really good job at emphasizing, you know, how that could come to fruition and any potential issues that might come from that as well. So yeah, I thought that was really helpful for her to bring that up.
Yeah, and then also I think at the end, like, both sides did a good job of, like, staying true to the client's interests. I know, like, at the end of this, like, sometimes I feel a little pressure, like, let's just, like, concede so we can, like, get a deal. But I think we did a good job of saying, like, our client won't authorize this, and I think it was helpful to be upfront about that. Like, our client won't authorize, like, above 7%. I know, like, you can say that as, like, a negotiation tactic, but, like, that wasn't the fact. So I thought that being upfront about that, I mean, we're gonna potentially be buying this company, so I feel like there's no reason to like, use fake numbers as leverage. So I thought that was a good thing to, like, start off our potential partnership as, like, being transparent.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that trust was great. And then overall, this was emphasized. It was really important to our company and, like, the health and future of Carousel to make sure that this deal went through. And so I think again, with the indemnification, with the proper payment, and with also the easily triggered termination fee, we did a really good job at saying, like, here are our musts, we're like great on that, and then taking the rest back for a later consideration. Awesome, and I think we're at time, so that's all we have. Thank you.
So I think we'll begin. Coming into this negotiation, our biggest motivation was that we have board pressure to go through this acquisition. We weren't anticipating having any other bidders. So from our perspective, we definitely wanted to make sure this acquisition went through. But just outside of the fact pattern, we were thinking as well, if we came back with a term sheet that didn't align with the board's goals, that'd be worse than not having an acquisition. And so we definitely didn't want to go beyond any of the boundaries that our board or our client had set. In terms of the actual agreement on some terms that we had come to, the payment schedule, we had reached a $100 million earnout with an 83% target. And the 83% target is within the set range that we had. It was slightly lower than the 85% bound. And we really wanted to make sure that the amount was as small as possible, because just from industry perspective, a lot of earnouts don't actually end up getting paid, and we wanted to make sure we minimize that instead of minimizing the target. The retention plan, just going into it, and the numbers we were hearing didn't align at all with the numbers that we had, and so going into the final package deal after our discussion outside, we were like, just table it if we need to, because there were a lot of issues about the duration of the contracts, whether they'd be at salary, whether the severance package, how that would work, and there were too many issues given the time that we had to discuss all of that fully. And so coming in, we just decided to table it. The termination fee, we tentatively agreed on. They needed to have CEO approval of the 8%. Our motivations here were to keep it as high as possible. We were not anticipating that we would need to leave this acquisition at any point for any other bidder, and we wouldn't have a no-cause walkaway as well. And so we were happy that we had an 8% if they also had that 8%, because we really wanted to make sure that they were locked in. For indemnification, it was a 1 year at $90 million. But here it was very narrowly tailored to the specific issue that was concerning them, which is the issues of trust and safety in this class action that was on the horizon. And so that was also within our range. Our top range was $100 million for the 1 year. And so that worked out as well. And then my co-counsel will discuss some of the strategies we employed.
So one of the strategies we kind of prepared beforehand when we read this fact pattern was to think about how these topics connect with each other. So for example, we thought number one and the payment schedule and the employment retention really go together, because you need to retain employee to be able to maximize the earnout. We also thought about how the indemnification could affect our earnout target. So these are the things we try to bundle as a whole and really think through them in a business practical way versus just doing a spreadsheet exercise of negotiating the numbers. We also try to really think in their interest, or at least frame it in their interest. For example, when we talk about employee retention, of course we want a bigger check for our executives, but we're gonna frame it in a way that helps make the deal go through, right? So in a way that they can more easily digest and accept. We also try to creatively expand the pie without changing the pie. For example, we proposed the tenure-based compensation system, and we proposed kind of a tiered termination fee system. So there are ways we try to expand the pie without losing interest on both sides. And I think lastly, we really just thought through this pattern together as a team in the practical real life sense. So just a little context, Betty was a hospitality major at Cornell before law school and worked in the industry. I worked on Twitter's legal team on the eve of his acquisition. So we both kind of bring some mix of industry practical sense into this, and we really think of ways that the other side would be interested in. Why are they interested in this deal, and why are we interested in coming to this table?
And so some specific good and bad things that we did. Good things, I think we started strong with a really clear opening statement describing our motivations and coming to the negotiating table, setting the agenda. And we did definitely serve our clients' goals, and we tried to really understand the motivations behind the numbers that we were given in the fact pattern. And we developed our creative solutions, not all of which were actually employed or agreed upon, but we put them out there. And then we also did frame specific things to benefit us. On our fact pattern, it is called the earnout provision, but obviously we were not aiming for an earnout, so we just renamed it the payment schedule. And then some bad things, I think it was very clear that the time management could have been better. This is shorter than our previous rounds of negotiation by 10 minutes, but with the same amount of issues. So it was a struggle for us. We were aiming to get a break at around the 20-minute mark, and we kind of hit it around 24 minutes. So that was definitely not within our expectations. And because of that, at the very end, while we were discussing the numbers, there was a bit of rush and some miscommunication. It was like throwing numbers out there. We tried to get it as clear as possible on the board, but it is a little messy. And so I think that can be improved for our next negotiation, wherever that may be. So be open to any questions if there are. Okay, do we go out or they come in?
All right, we have Carousel entering the room as we speak. While they walk on in, let's get a round of applause for our final round teams, yeah? All right, I am literally going to collect judges' ballots as we speak. Looks like they're wrapping them up for us now. We're going to tabulate those scores. We're going to grab some trophies. We're going to hand out awards and declare a champion in about 5 minutes, so stay tuned. Thanks. All right, everyone. Looks like we might actually finish this event on time, which I'm so excited about, but not as excited as I am to announce the winners this year. Judges, are you okay with doing a little bit of feedback before we announce the winners of the tournament? So I'm going to let our judges just give a little bit of feedback before we move on to announcing the winners. Before we do, I completely neglected to mention the one person without whom none of this would be possible, the competition founder, Joseph Halloum, who is not only an alum of Berkeley Law School, but also the Haas Business School here at Berkeley, and he started the Halloum competition 13 years ago. So we're very excited to have him with us today, and every year that he's able to make it. If you are in the audience and loved being in the Halloum Negotiation Competition this year, or just came to watch today, but you'll be around next year, there's also a Halloum Business Competition in the fall that's open to 2Ls, 3Ls, and LLM students, as well as students over at Haas. So we hope to see you there, students. With that, I'm going to pass it over to our judges for some brief oral feedback. Do you want to maybe start us off on the end, Clint? And we can kind of move down however many comments you want to give. And then we'll go ahead and announce the results.
All right, well, thank you. Well done to everybody. Start with some positives, and I would say, first of all, just remarkably polished, well prepared, well executed, very professional. That aspect of it is always very interesting to see, especially given the short time frame and then the ridiculously unrealistic take a 9-month process into 40 minutes, which is always a fun part of the competition. So well done to everybody on both sides for that, and those things are all incredibly close. The one piece of feedback I want to give for everybody for just help you improve in the future, it applies to both teams basically equally. And one of the things that I thought was that will help you in real life negotiations is to change the way that we're relating to how we're making an offer a little bit better. And so I put this comment in both people's notes if you're going to get these back. But we were making offers that were, here's a number that's on the table, and then verifying, is this amenable to you? In fact, the question, basically the main question I heard spoken the entire time was, is this amenable to you? Is this amenable to you? Is this amenable to you? And not a lot of questions about the reasons why, or understanding a sense of relative value or priority, right? So to do a better job negotiating in the future and in a more complex thing where you have time, you're going to be wanting to not having a relationship where you're seeing if a number works for somebody and then verifying whether it does, but to actually make a proposal, right? And then make a case for why that proposal makes sense, right? Say something proactive that speaks to the kinds of things that are going to be important to one side or the other about, it sounds like this is, you're looking at the problem in this way. We propose this number, and here's how, based on what we know on your terms or whatever else there is, we're going to emphasize the aspects of that have crossover, right? I want to be the reason that when I say something, that something that I'm saying, if I'm going to be a value add, is going to be the reason that someone agrees to something else. Because otherwise, what we're doing is we're just managing numbers that exist logistically in the background to these ranges, right? And so I would just say everybody could benefit a little bit from thinking about, when I'm making an offer, to remember that the whole purpose of making the offer is to think about, how can I make a case for that offer? And I think everybody should try to think about building that into a repertoire. But otherwise, really good job.
All right, I'm gonna go quick. I'm gonna piggyback on what Clint said, and this is a comment for both. And just to think about it as you're saying it, when we put out the offers, I do think that the tone dropped, meaning you didn't seem confident on the offers. You were waiting for opposing to tell you that wasn't great, right? And so we would say a response and then say, and then can I do 75%? Right? And then opposing has to say, well, what was the offer? And immediately I think they don't believe in it. There's movement there that I can push, right? At the same time, I think even asking that follow-up question, and I think Clint hit on it, and it was, are you amenable to that? And it was very low, and you knew that they weren't, right? But just lead with that offer as if it is the offer that you prepared. You know it's justified, you know it's right, and you're gonna stick it. And so I think we could just be a little bit stronger with our words and our language. I heard a lot of, we might have to maybe move that a little bit. You know in your facts, that is not possible. You are not authorized to go there. So be strong and say, we need to go higher, period. Right? You don't need to feel, you are the legal counsel. You don't need to feel bad that you are telling opposing no. You just stick it. Right? And I know both teams talked about this in their self-analysis. Time management, I think you did great on time because time is so limited. But know that at any point, if it goes too quickly and you are trying to catch your breath, then feel free to slow things down. So if you feel like the momentum is going too quickly and that you opposing is pestering you with questions, then take a second, shift that dynamic and ask opposing questions. Figure out what they want, right? You both have the same amount of leverage at the table. At least you're going to pretend that you do. So make sure that even if time is shorter than you want, time will always be shorter than you want. Just know that you have control over the process. Slow down the pace so you're not agreeing to anything too quickly, or that you know exactly what is on the table to be agreed upon. All right. But really, I mean, these are just the things to tweak it. It was really fantastic job and a pleasure to watch. So well done to both teams.
Yeah, I think everybody did a fantastic job, and I'm kind of reaching to provide any feedback. I mean, one thing, there was a number of times in the negotiation that I heard, this is a reasonable offer, or this is market, or this is fair. I think when you're starting in the profession and you're a junior attorney, when you make arguments to what is and what's not market, you'll find yourself it can increase deal friction, because if the person on the other side has a lot more seniority, that's when things will be like, oh, I've seen like 100 deals, or I've seen 1,000 deals and I've never seen that. So if you're going to make that argument that something is market or fair or unreasonable, you got to have a rational basis, which everybody else has sort of talked about. You have to back it up with some other piece of data, whether it's actual stats that you've looked at or something else. But just anticipating that early in your career, you often be negotiating somebody with a lot more seniority. Those can sometimes be trigger words for opposing counsel.
Just want to echo what everybody else has been saying. You guys both teams did a really great job. I think it was really polished. I think you presented the issues really clearly. The PalsGab team, I think in particular, did a really great job at packaging the terms together, tying together like the earnout period and the C-suite executives, retention period. I think was particularly effective. You did a good job also at bringing up kind of creative solutions to put on the table and revisit at a later date. And I think anchoring, higher on some of the terms gave you wiggle room, especially since you were packaging some of these terms to come down later on when you circled back. If I was to pick out anything in particular to maybe improve on a little bit, probably going back to what the first two judges said, some of these initial offers you made, while I think you did a good job at positioning yourself at the outset, it was very much like, here's kind of what our position, what's yours, instead of kind of laying down, what you think the term should be. For the Carousel team, again, great job. I think really you did a good job at building rapport at the beginning and kind of especially with the other team, kind of packaging these terms, saying, let's table this and circle back. You did a good job at bringing issues back to the forefront, laying out the indemnity issue at the beginning when they kind of try to gloss past it and put it at the end of the list rather than going in order from top to bottom. I think that was really effective. The severance and contract period for the retention. I think there was a time there during the negotiations where it was kind of getting a little bit wishy-washy as like what people were offering, and you brought it back to say, I think really these two issues need to be coupled together. I think that was really great. I think maybe one area with kind of appealing to what your client has authorized you to do, while that is definitely a legitimate negotiation strategy and something that you should keep in mind, kind of laying out what your upper range is often kind of puts you on the back foot. So, in a real life negotiation scenario where you are putting it down your best and final, you can tell the other side, I'm not able to go past this number. But I think generally speaking, I would hesitate to kind of go that far in these kind of discussions.
All right, round of applause for our judges for their time, experience, and feedback. And I'm so excited to announce to you, thank you for joining us over your lunch break, but the moment is finally here. We're gonna crown a champion. The winning team today of the 2024 Halloum Negotiation Competition is PalsGab. Congratulations, Betty and Yi. And we have trophies for both our champion team and our finalist team. Round of applause for all of our finalists who did truly a great job. We wish you all the best. Thanks for coming out today. Take care.